Hello and welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining our session on findings and issues management. My name is Sean Kelly and I'm the pre-sales consultant here at Protecht Group. My role is really focused on helping customers perceive the benefits of Protecht's solution to help them achieve their strategic objectives and enabling them to take better risk-based decisions. For those of you who are new to our webinars and maybe unfamiliar with Protecht Group, we are an enterprise risk management software and advisory company that supports our customers on all aspects of risk management. That could be training and education, framework and advisory services, or Protecht ERM, which is our flagship enterprise risk management software as a service product. The product covers the full life cycle of risk, including risk assessments, continual monitoring of those risks, incident capture and treatment plans related to operational risk, regulatory compliance, IT or vendor risk management, and operational resilience. For today, we are going to be focusing on risk improvement piece of that life cycle through the use of findings and issues management. And a little housekeeping just before we begin. We should be able to wrap up in about 20 minutes with a brief introduction to start, but spending the majority of the time today live within Protecht ERM. Where we will cover the what, the why, the how behind findings and issues management. What are they? Why are they helpful for managing risks? And how can Protecht help you manage them within your organisation? So just before we get started, we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. The presentation is going to be around about 20 minutes long, 5-minute introduction covering risk life cycle and findings and issues overview. There'll be a product demonstration about 15 minutes, which will cover risk in motion, findings and issues register, and finding and issues dashboard. If you have any questions throughout this whole presentation, please just enter them into the question section on the go-to control panel. We'll get back to any questions as quickly as we can within the webinar, or they will be replied to after the webinar. After we've had the webinar, there will be a post-webinar questionnaire, so please, if you could fill that in, that'd be really helpful to us. And we do have slides and recordings, so don't worry about taking screenshots or trying to take copious notes. It'll all be available to you on a downloadable format. Okay. So firstly, I'm going to start off by describing what is the risk life cycle. As we mentioned before, Protecht really covers the entire life cycle of risk, from the identification and assessment of the risk, through to the monitoring and review through controls assurance, risk metrics and KRIs and compliance, through the responsiveness of incident management and change risk management, and then through to the improvements driven by audit, findings and issues and actions management. So the risk use case listed across the bottom of the diagram just represents common use cases that Protecht ERM is used for, and findings and issues falls into that improved phase of the life cycle. So with findings and issues management, you can stop problems before they grow. With Protecht, you can identify and resolve issues early before they escalate into major or regulation violations. Protect your revenue, reputation, operations by staying ahead of potential disruptions. You can stay compliant and confident. Protecht simplifies compliance with centralised findings, management and up-to-date documentation, so you can avoid costly penalties, fines and reputational damage of non-compliance with ease. You can help make smarter decisions with real-time insights, so gain that instant visibility into issues and resolutions to prioritise resources where they're most needed, so that empowers leadership with data-driven insights for strategic planning and decision-making. You can drive accountability and trust. Keep teams accountable with clear tracking of ownership, deadlines and resolution steps, demonstrating strong oversight to stakeholders, auditors and regulators, earning their trust every step of the way. You can save time on resources, let automated workflows and integrated reporting handle the busy work for you. Free your teams to focus on what matters, driving those strategic initiatives and delivering results. And you can turn those challenges into opportunities. Protecht doesn't just help you manage risk, it helps you discover the process improvements and new innovations, so you can achieve that operational excellence and long-term success by balancing risk reduction with continuous improvement.
What we currently have on the screen in front of us is the Information Technology Department Health Score. I'm currently logged in as a user called John Ciso, and he's the head of Department of Information Technology. And he runs the team, and he's trying to drive up the Information Technology Health Score. So at the top left of this dashboard that you can see on the screen, we have the health score. It's currently sitting at about 2.4. And what we want to do is really drive that score up to show we've embedded risk culture into the organization. The tiles to the right represent the risk life cycle. So we have assessments through risk controls, we have monitoring through attestations and KRIs, we have improvements through actions and audit findings, and then finally we have responsiveness through incidents. So each of these tiles represents a score that aggregates up to give us our health score that's currently sitting at 2.4. So we really want to make that better. So where do we look? I mean, the key points we can look at are where we see red areas in these tiles. These are the areas where we can really look to address and show how we can make improvements. Now below the tiles we have what is called risk in motion table. The risk in motion table is made up of the risk events that sit within the information technology department or business unit. And what we can see there is that they have several risk events, and at the bottom we have an aggregation of those event scores. But if we look at one particular score, such as external cyber attack, virus, malware, and denial of service, we can see that we do have a high inherent rating, a high residual rating. And as I come across the rows, I can notice that, yeah, I've got some attestations that are non-compliant. I've got some red KRIs where tolerances sit outside of appetite. I've got overdue actions, and I've got overdue findings as well. So what I really need to do is go and drill down further and work out what is going on. So as John Ciso, I'm really interested in seeing what's happening with this particular risk event. And again, if I just click and drill through, what I'm able to see now is what we call our risk on a page. So as we look at risk on a page, we can see that this is the external cyber attacks, virus, malware, and denial of service risk. We have our heat map at the top left telling us about our likelihood and consequence for the residual and the inherent risk. We have our risk information, give us descriptions, titles, business owners, last review dates. But then what we get to see as we come down the page are all those components that we talked about before, the controls. You know, we can see the design and operating ratings and when they're next reviews. And if there's any actions associated and if there's any overdue actions that we could, get closed off and increase our risk score rating. We can see any metrics such as the KRIs and how they're trending across time for this particular risk. And one of the things we're going to look at today specifically is what the webinar is focused on is open issues and findings. So we're going to look at those at also a departmental level for John Ciso, who's running the department. But later on in the presentation, we're going to look from Sarah's Chief Risk Officer's perspective as well as how she sees things from the helicopter view of the organisation. We can see incidents as well associated and complaints, obligations, and attestations. So for those monitoring traits, we can also see at the bottom screen any open actions that we could address for this particular risk. So risk on a page has really shown us where we can focus our efforts as John Ciso, the department owner, to help drive up that risk score across the full department. So here we are logged in as Sarah, Chief Risk Officer. Her profile looks slightly different from John Ciso's that we saw earlier, in the sense that we're now looking at the whole organisation across risk. So we still have the risk score, which is representing the risk for the organisation, and the tiles where we're looking at the assessments and the monitoring of those risks and any improvements and any responses that we would have to those risks. But the risk in motion table just below now looks more at the individual business units. So we're easily able to see as we look down where there could be problems. So I'm looking at information technology. I have some red there. As I move across, I've got some red KRIs and I've got some actions overdue and also some overdue audit findings. So very easily see from the Chief Risk Officer, Sarah's perspective about where issues are and where they need addressing. But for this particular piece, we're going to concentrate on the audit findings and health score. So if we just click on the view here, what we're able to see now from Sarah's perspective is she can see all the findings and issues across the whole organization. And this particular view, what we're looking at is by rating. So we've got the high, low, moderate, and process improvements. We can look at this data from her perspective in a different way. So for example, if I was going to look at John Ciso, who's I'm interested in, his department, I know he works in IT. All of a sudden, from her perspective, I can see all the IT information technology findings. But I'm just going to go back to the main view. You can create the views as you feel fit. And what we'll do is we'll drill down in one particular finding and issue and just follow that through. So if we look at the information technology one, that's John Ciso's department, what we'll notice is that at the top of the screen, the first thing we see is that we have some status buttons, and this allows Sarah in her role to move forward the record to closure. We wouldn't have seen this necessarily in John Ciso's, as the state-based workflows and notifications are driven by role access. As we move top of the screen as well, we can see things where we have customer access. We can add certain users to this record so they can see it. It could be user specific, role based, or a particular business unit. We can also look at reports of the record. So just before we go into the record, if I wanted to output this, say in a PDF, I can print on the PDF and I'll be able to see that full report of this record that I can use to embed or pass on as further documentation. The record itself, we have a full audit history. So if I click on the history button and look at versions, I now get a full audit history of that record, and I can see in yellow where there's been updates, in green where there's been new rec bits created, and also if I click on a particular record and then show the version, I can go back to how that state of that record was at a particular point in time. So I'm just going to close that down. Within Protecht, we have a standard format for the record. So always at the top of the records, you have a core section. This gives us the unique identifier, but it also gives us the ability to map records to their particular business units in the business unit structure. And we can model that structure exactly the same way as you have your structure in your organization and assign those. We also have some audit information about when it was created and last modified. Again, we just saw that in the history, so we know who and what changed the records. If we move into the findings and issues section, the first thing we notice is we've got some findings or issues, which is typically linked to, well, findings typically linked to a standard policy or requirement, issues which areas need improvement or potential non-compliances. We have some basic information here, title, description, but without sounding like a broken record, we can connect that finding to its relevant risk from our central library, and which makes sense given we're all doing risk-based audits these days. And so you'll be able to see here that I can click to the risk events library, I can click on operational risks, and I can pick that particular risk event there. I can also extend that operational risk down further through the taxonomy, as many layers as I like. And again, the same with controls. If I click on the controls, I can go to the control taxonomy and pick the controls associated with this finding or issue. The real power of this connection is that we can aggregate those audit findings up and plot them for John Ciso's profile so that he can see that given against the given risk. It'll quickly be able to understand that he has outstanding internal audit findings on that home launch pad that we just saw. And once he sees those findings, he'll be able to respond and ensure any action which is associated to it will be completed. If we move down the page slightly, we get to see any other impacts. If you want to put any more further documentation about any other impacts, you can document it there. And then we get to see the auditor's recommendations, where we can provide actionable steps to address audit findings, improve processes, enhance compliance, mitigate risks, and strengthen those internal controls. And then after the recommendations, we'll have something like the management agreement summary. And this is where we've got the descriptions of the issues identified, the steps that we've taken, assignments of tasks, deadlines for completing, methods of tracking, and criteria for confirming that the issue is resolved. And this is going to ensure that transparency and accountability while providing a structured approach to resolving the audit findings. The next thing we see is the ratings. So we go through from process improvements, where the issue represents an opportunity to enhance the process or practices, like streamlining documentation processes for efficiency, through to extreme, where we need immediate action to address the severe risks, like a major fraud detected. We also have that full ownership of the record, so we can see who the audit owner is and who the findings or issues owner is. And this means that when we have notifications across time, these two people, users, will be notified. We also have the due date for the finding, which had an original value. It's been updated, and now we can finally see that the actual due date's also been missed for the closure of this finding. So we might want to know a bit more information about why this has happened. So if we just move down slightly in the record, we have the findings and issues management. This allows all the parties to communicate with each other within the record about this particular issue of findings. If I just click on this show all button for a second here, we can see there's been some communication from Sarah, Chief Risk Officer, through to John CISO, and it's all time-stamped on that communication. We can also attach any evidence that you require for the finding or issue, and we can attach multiple documents here. And one of the great things about Protecht is that when you have to distribute this, you can actually just download all attachments in one go instead of having to click through individually. Now, within finding and issues management, should there be any actions required, we can highlight that, and we can begin to add actions, one from a register, or you can create them from this form. And what we can do is then follow those actions through to closure, and once the actions have been completed, we could then move on to the closure stage of the finding or issue. And again, that would just include a closure commentary, which might be a brief summary of the original issue, a description of steps implemented, details or documents providing the issue is resolved, the outcome of the tests and reviews, and finally, the sign-off by the particular party, the auditor, or the manager, or the chief risk officer. Welcome to our off-the-shelf finding and issues dashboard. It helps you understand the progress and ratings of the findings and issues. So if we look at the top, effectively we can see how many findings and issues we've got open, and that can be broken down by the findings and the issues. We can see how many of those are overdue and how many of the actions associated with them are also overdue. We can see the two top ratings of extreme and high, so I'm kind of interested in why I've got 9 high, and one of the things I can do with our dashboard is filter it down. So if I was to click the high button, I can now begin to see the information about those high ratings that within the dashboard. It then changes all the values, so I can see all those details. If I want to save this filter, so I'm always interested in coming back and looking at high again at the top right, I can create a filtered save of that point in time capture for high ratings, or maybe I want to do it by a particular business unit, because currently I'm logged in as Sarah, Chief Risk Officer, so I can see all that information. So I'm just going to take off the high tag for a second, and we'll come back to the original dashboard. And the other things I can then see is the 12. So from a risk admin, Chief Risk Officer persona, I can see that full 12-month trend. Again, if I was logged in as John CISO, who we saw earlier on, I would see the trend across his particular department, information technology. I can see a breakdown of all the ratings across all the findings and where they sit. Do they sit in process improvement and low and moderate, and how many sit in high, which we just looked at. I can look for where the business units who have the most findings and issues. So here we can see it's information technology, so it gives me a clue that I might want to go and speak to John CISO about his department. And again, if I look at the owners overdue, I can also see that John CISO is featuring there. If I look at the top 10 risks, I can see it's external type attack that seems to have 6 of those findings and issues. So again, it's leading me to the information technology and the John CISO conversation that I can have. And at the bottom of the page, I have the full table of all the risks that are outstanding, and I can then sort that table for the particular status. So I can look at all the open ones that are outstanding, whether they're issues or findings, what business unit they're sitting on, who the ownership is, and what their rating is. So it gives me a clear understanding of what is going on within the organization. And if I wanted to export this dashboard here, I can export this out into PowerPoint, Excel, or PDF. And if I just bring onto the screen shortly, you should be able to see now, this is the output from there that I've brought into PowerPoint, and this is also fully editable, so I can change the text and change things if I wanted to include this into a report pack or board pack. So here you're able to see how quickly and easily we can drill into the information, gain the value, we can save those particular dashboards filtered, and we can export them so you can put them into your reporting packs. So that brings us to an end of this webinar. So as I mentioned earlier, findings and issues management is just one step of the overall risk management lifecycle that we support. If you'd like more information on Protecht ERM and any of the other offerings, our website is also a great resource. But feel free to reach out directly to me via LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to answer any of the questions you still have. And if you remember at the beginning of the presentation, we would definitely appreciate if you could fill out our post-webinar survey. That will appear in a few moments. Otherwise, hope today's session was helpful, and thank you everyone for watching.